We are ready.
Okay. So today I have with me a lovely entrepreneur by the name of Jodie Cook that came highly recommended from a previous guest, John Warlow, the author of Built to Sell, my favorite, one of my favorite, my favorite slash one of my favorite business books. It's kind of my business Bible, how I go about building businesses, and kind of the way I guess Jodie does too, whether she did intentionally or unintentionally. She was a guest on John's Built to Sell radio podcast. I heard her story there. John recommended I talk to her and was just super inspired. I think there's a lot of synergies as well. We're both kind of in the agency space. She sold a social media marketing agency. Let's start there. I like one of the things I like to do, Jodie, in medias res, right? Into the middle of something. That's kind of how a lot of movies start out, right? I
Yep.
think of they start at the end or the middle, the climax, and it's like, okay, how do we get there? So that's what we're going to do here. So you ended up selling your company, what, a year or two ago?
Yep. 2.5 years, March 2021.
March 2021. And is there any number that you can tell people? I know that's the juicy stuff.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, I can tell you that we were 18 people. I can tell you that it was a 7-figure exit. And I can tell you that my handover took 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there wasn't an earnout,
There was not an earnout. Yeah, that was
which
quite a
is
big part of
crazy
it.
for the agency space, service
Yeah.
businesses in general, as we know. Had you ever sold a business before, Jodie?
I was just about to say no. And then I remembered I sold a tiny, tiny e-commerce site that I set up to sell Stoicism t-shirts, but it really
Mm-hmm.
was tiny. I think it was like a 3-figure exit. It
A
was like,
three-figure exit?
yeah.
So basically, no. Okay.
So basically, no. The answer is no to that.
Yeah. So you had started this. I listened to a lot of episodes, so I don't exactly remember. I think you'd been operating this agency for a good 5-10 years, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I had it for just under 10 years when I sold it. And actually, funny that you mentioned John Warlow's book, Built to Sell, as being one of your top 2 favorite books, because I know that your other favorite book is The E-Myth. And
Yes.
if you do want to start in the middle of the story, I guess The E-Myth probably plays quite a big part of that. So it was
I see. How so?
2014. It was 2014. And I realized that I was running the Jodie show. And maybe a lot
Totally.
of agency owners are also running the insert your name here show, where the entire business runs because they exist as a person, and it would
Mm-hmm.
not run if they didn't exist as a person. And so it was a combination of reading the E-Myth, reading the 4-Hour Work Week, and booking myself a 5-week holiday to Australia that was 3 months in the future, that made me sort my act out and create an agency that didn't need me to run it. So that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah. And one thing I want to highlight here, I feel like this is a relevant point to highlight this. You did it with a general manager in place and 65 SOPs. That's the number I really want to highlight here. Like
Yes.
it wasn't 300 SOPs and trainings. Like it's a very achievable number,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Like
Yeah,
it's not a
65
ton.
65 SOPs, and I made those in the 3 months before that trip to Australia. So
Yeah.
the actual process of making those SOPs was, I'm going away. I'm going to be on the other side of the world. It's like a 10-hour time difference. I need to sort out a way of my agency running without me. So this was just, it built into 65 SOPs. It started off as just a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet was, what do I do? What processes do I currently run? And I wrote them all down. And then it was like, column A was the process. Column B was who does it now. And that was just me. And then column C was who's going to do it in the future.
Yeah.
And that was like a person, that was a role that I was going to hire, that was like a software program that I was going to start using, or it was just like, stop doing this stupid thing because you don't need to do it at all. And then column D was like, when am I going to get this sorted by? So that kind of became the plan of action. And then my general manager came after that, but it was very much as a result of identifying, I need someone to be an authority here. I need someone to be in charge of stuff. It's not just going to work if it's just me running stuff with a bunch of like freelancers or just other agencies.
Yeah. So for each SOP, you had a current and future owner. So in essence, one person owned an entire an SOP.
So that was the original spreadsheet was like the kind of the process spreadsheet. And then each of the 65 processes I'd written out, and I went granular on these. It wasn't just like buying office supplies. It was like, this is the company credit card. Who's in charge of it? What should you do? What's the numbers? Like, what should you do if this happens? It was real, if this, then that, lots of granular detail, probably too much detail, but I figured I'd rather put too much because then they can just, if they don't need it, then they don't need to use it. But yeah, it was those 65 that were then followed by various other people. I guess a lot of them I wrote myself, but it was better when I got the person who was now responsible for that process to write them, because I'd be like, hey, you're going to be in charge of this. Or, well, I'd ask them if they wanted to be in charge of it. Then they'd say yes. Then I'd explain the process. And then I'd say, can you take the notes and can you write this up? And then I found that they had much more ownership when it was them that had written it rather than following this set of instructions that I'd written. So it was a mix of me writing and other people writing them as well.
Yeah. And then with the SOP library, or whatever you want to call it, did everyone have access to all SOPs, or was it kind of like sectioned out, only certain people can have access to the credit card SOPs and whatnot? What was that?
Yeah. Like? I mean, I'd probably do it differently now, but back in 2014, it was just a very simple Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of tabs, and each tab was each of the different SOPs. And then it got like exported into PDFs. It was really that simple. And those PDFs were in folders. There was a folder that was for everyone. There was a folder that was just for management team. There was a folder that was maybe just for accounts. It was like, yeah, it was exactly as you say. It was, you only need to have access to the SOP if you need to know it.
Yeah. And then it is interesting. I see that working both ways. Like some companies are like, oh, everyone has access to all SOPs. Everyone should know how to do like every job in the company and stuff like that. And I've seen that work very well. But I've also seen like, your instance work pretty well also. I don't think there's any correct answer there. I was just more curious. And then did you ever take this from like Excel to a PDF to ever a learning management system of any kind?
No, didn't take it to a learning management system, but I would say that the entire ethos of having a manual was very much used throughout the team. So me and Joanna and the team leaders, it was very much like if we got asked a question that we knew was in the manual, we'd push back and we'd say, it's funny that you're asking me that. I'm sure it's in the manual. And then we'd be like, have you checked the manual? And then someone would be like, no. And then they'd go, the next time they wouldn't want to be asked that question. So they'd go check the manual first. So it started to become this thing like, have you checked the manual? Check it first. Because I think it's all very well having the SOPs, but you have to actually get people to use them. Otherwise it's no use. And if someone does ask you a question that you know full well is already documented, the easy thing to do is to answer it, because it just, it ticks a box, they go away, you get that dopamine hit. But really it's like, no, I'm not going to answer this because this is the reason I made it. And I'd say that ethos went further as well with especially Joanna, who was my general manager and who was there from probably about 2016 till like she's still there now, even though the company's sold. And she was really good at firstly her job that was operational excellence. It was like she had one job description, operational excellence. But she was really proud of when she could solve something and not bug me with it. So she saw it as her duty to protect my time. And we kind of had this like phrase, I guess. So if something ever happened with clients or with team or with anything that just can go wrong in agency life, you know what it's like. If I ever had to get involved, the phrase we used was like deployed, like we're going to deploy Jodie. And we absolutely saw that as a last resort. And so one of the things that she really tried to protect for me, which I'm so grateful to her for doing, is protect my time and not have anyone booking meetings with me. So if she had ever said to me, Jodie, I'm so sorry, but you're going to need to get on a meeting with this client, it was because she tried like a million other things. She'd be like, I've tried this, I've tried that, that hasn't worked, I've tried this, I've gone back to this, I've tried this, but I just really need you for this. And if that was the case, it's like, yeah, okay, I understand. But it was so rare that would happen, because she really took it upon herself to do that. And I think that's what you want in that general manager or operations manager or that person. They have to be proud of not getting you involved. They have to see it as their responsibility to put you out of a job.
Yeah. I want to highlight here for any role players, team members, people working in an organization, not as the founder. Like, if you want to be really good at your job, if you want to be an A player, if you want to go far, like this is the Bible right here. Like,
Totally.
don't deploy Jodie, don't deploy Jordan. Like, try to avoid that. And I've thought about before, I swear I heard this once, and perhaps it was even on John's show, an entrepreneur that was talking about a KPI that gets filled out on a weekly scorecard by each team member. Like, how many times did you ask your manager a question? And the lower that number, the better. But I was, I'm too scared to implement something like that because of the obvious unintended consequences of that. I feel like,
I mean, split it out. Like, how many times did you ask your manager a new question? How many times did you ask your manager an old question? I don't want old questions,
sure,
because they should be documented. But new questions, I guess. Yeah, I want new questions, but I still want someone to come to me with at least a bit of the reason why the problem happened in the first place, and then at least a few of the responses or the solutions that they're suggesting.
I actually want to get more to your origin story with the business. Like, I'm assuming you started it because you probably started as a freelancer. You like doing social media stuff. You're good at it. And am I correct in my assumption?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, like, because this is where people get stuck, going from freelancer to manager to executive to owner of the business. Running a business and owning a business are two very, 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 very different things. I just feel like only 10% of 5 or 10% of people in the agency space ever really make that leap. So, geez, it's like, when did you start? What were the factors that made you start thinking about that? What was the year? How many years in? Like, when did you start thinking about making that leap?
So I started the business in August 2011 with a very simple business plan that was just 2 words: get clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then started rocking up to networking events saying, hey, I'm Jodie, I'm a social media manager. At that time, social media managers there weren't many of them around. They didn't really exist. Social media was such a new thing. I was setting up Twitter accounts for clients because they hadn't got them. And I was convincing people why they should be on social media. It was such a different ballgame to what it's like now. And then once I started getting clients, I'd heard somewhere, probably in a business book, because I'd started reading them by that point, that it was just a really good idea to get recurring monthly revenue. And recurring monthly revenue was great, and project-based work was rubbish because you had to keep quoting for it. And even like right up to the day we sold, I didn't like doing project-based work. We were 80% recurring revenue because I was like, this is how you do it. You just have this going every single month and you don't have to think about it. So I think I was about 8 months in, and I had 40 hours a week of client work that I was doing. But I still felt like I wanted to go networking and meet people and get new clients and work with new customers, but I wasn't losing any customers. So I didn't really know how that was going to work. And so I'd say that was the crossroads. That was the idea where on one hand, I could keep going as a freelancer and just maybe charge more or just keep that client base and do that. And that would be totally fine. Loads of people do that. Or I could start hiring. So I started hiring, and I honestly didn't know what I was doing at all. I think I got my mom to join me for the first person I interviewed. I was probably more nervous than they were. It was the first time I'd ever interviewed anyone. I actually hired the first person I ever interviewed because he seemed cool. I didn't really know what I was ranking him based on, but I guess the idea was, when I was sat in front of him, I was just thinking, what will my clients think of this person? And I decided that they would quite like him, and he did some cool stuff and he'd done some cool projects and he seemed pretty nice. So he was on board, he was hired. And so what I did then was I just went about passing my clients to him and training him to pretty much do my job and do exactly what I was doing. So I think that was about 8 months in. I hired the second person pretty soon after that, because I realized that once I'd handed over my clients, I had all this time to do sales. And so sales came pretty quickly. So I think the second person I hired within another couple of months after that. And then that's when I then was not having any clients myself and focusing all on sales. And then it kind of leads to another bottleneck where you're like, well, I'm doing the selling, and then sometimes clients don't really let go of you when you do the selling.
Totally.
And then you hit a new blocker. So it was like, this is just the agency game, right? We're just finding new problems to solve. And they're all expected problems because every single agency owner hits them in the exact same order. But that was definitely the next one.
At the time when you hired your first person, I'm assuming they were a local hire or in an English speaking country primarily and not overseas somewhere. That's what it sounds like. Was there ever a thought as to, maybe I should hire from, overseas, or like if you hired locally, like what was the percentage of revenue at that time? Like roughly, I'm sure you don't have the exact number, but that's hard for a lot of agency owners to square. Like,
Yes.
hiring someone in my country, very, very, very expensive, like $5,000 a month. Like what were the economics of that?
I don't remember exactly, but I remember that hiring overseas didn't even occur to me at the time. I think I was way pre all that. I was pre 4 hour work week. I was pre like Upwork. Maybe that year was pre Upwork. I don't know, but it just wasn't even a thing. So I think I advertised with like a local university, took on board a new graduate who kind of roughly spoke the lingo of social media and who I figured I could just teach my methods, because I mean, at the time, and maybe even now, there's not this giant rule book on exactly how to do it. And I really enjoyed that. It wasn't like we were starting an accountancy firm where the rules of accountancy has been the same for like decades and decades. It was like, we're kind of making it up as we go along. And so it's okay to get someone who is fresh out of university. I was so local at that point. I hardly did anything, even though we were representing clients online. I didn't do that much online myself. It was like going to physical networking events. We had a physical office. I turned up to the physical office. So it was just not any question about hiring someone who wasn't local.
Out of curiosity, I guess it was 2014 then, or whenever. What was the retainers that you were charging people? Like $2 per month, because that was a big retainer at the time before inflation.
Yeah. So 2011 was when I first started. I'm trying to remember. I reckon a kind of small client would have been like $500 a month. And at that time, probably a big client would have been $2,000 a month. And that was probably the range.
Yeah, I feel like the averages are double that now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was super different, and it was like making it up as you go along, because you're like, no one had a social media budget because it just didn't exist. So you were trying to convince them that it should be part of their marketing budget, and maybe even a lot of the clients that we had at the time, they didn't even have a marketing budget. It was just like, what do you mean a budget? We want it as cheap as possible. So then you'd just test out a few numbers and you'd see who said yes, and then that was your price.
So you had, $500 to $2,000 per month. I mean, roughly, you had 40 hours of work per week. How many clients was that, roughly?
Maybe 20? No, it wouldn't have been 20. It would have been maybe like 10, but various different sizes. Back then, probably very important to know, we didn't have like a niche or a niche, as you guys call them. It was like, we didn't niche down at all. It was just social media and social media management. And we were representing people across all different platforms. I think if I was starting an agency now, I would niche down platform, and I would probably niche down industry. So I'd be like, we do Instagram for dentists, or like we do Facebook ads for e-commerce furniture companies, or something like that. That's what I would do now. But back then it was so different. The kind of analogy I've used before is rabbits, deer, and elephants to describe the types of client sizes. And we were mainly going after like rabbits and deer as to the kind of size. So like the idea with rabbits is that they're those kind of $500 a month clients, or whatever your kind of lowest tier is. There's loads of them around. Once you catch one, you can catch loads of the same, because they all talk to each other and they just kind of multiply. Deer take a bit more effort to catch, but they can kind of feed you for longer. They're more sustained. They're like a nice juicy size, but they're not like so sought after like elephants, and elephants might be those that you pitch for. So it takes like maybe 2 or 3 people to do this multi-stage pitch. But once you
Totally.
have them, like they're really big, they're really juicy, they can last for a very long time, and they can kind of feed you very well. We were very much, we started with rabbits, we went on to deer, and then throughout the 10 years we had like a few elephants, but we weren't really set up to look after elephants. Like we didn't really go after pitches, we didn't really try and get really big clients. At the time we had one that was 20% of our revenue, but when they clicked their fingers, everything stopped. And I really hated the idea that all our other clients would have to suffer because this elephant was stomping around. So I didn't really enjoy that. We were much better deer hunters.
Now I'm going to go back to this, and you're going to see what I'm doing. I'm reverse engine because I'm just so interested in this. Backtracking. So you had about 10 clients, and you made this first hire. I'm guessing that's 15 to $20,000 or pounds per month, perhaps. How much did you pay your first hire, if you don't
I
mind
have
me
no
asking?
idea. I
You
honestly have
don't
no
know?
idea. It was such a
I'm
long
so
time ago.
interested.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll dig it out, and we can put it in the show notes or something. I will find out.
So you have an account manager at this point then, and
Yep.
did you transition current clients to, hey, here's this new person, I'm out? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I think I started bringing him with me to meetings. I started giving him different kind of tasks within the work to do, and started seeing how he got on. I think at first I was a bit scared about it, and I definitely at first retained being the main point of contact for the client. So it was very much, he was a kind of assistant account manager, and I guess I was still the main account manager until he could kind of take over completely, and then take over the communications, which is a really big part of it. But I remember that we had this one client who was a comedian, and he had this act, and he was doing all these shows around the country, and he just done Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and he had all these ideas and this potential. And we were representing him on Twitter. And I remember I got a call from him being like, hey, I want to talk to you about your new team member. And I was like, oh my God, no, what's he done? Because I just handed over this person. He might have been the first one I handed over. I was just really worried. I was like, oh my God, I was prepared to be like, I'm so sorry, I'll take it back. I'll never pass you over again. And he went, no, it's really good. He's actually written some really good tweets for me. I'm wondering if you would mind if I use them in my comedy show. And so he actually used these tweets that my team member had written. And I went and saw him in a comedy show, and he repeated them back on stage as if they were his. Nice. And I was like so proud. And so I feel like that was the moment where I just thought, this is going to be okay. If we can do it with that guy, we can do this with anyone. It's not going to hold us back.
What was like the frame that you gave to your clients, as to why they should accept this new person and you leaving? How'd you frame that?
I don't think I said I was leaving. I think I said I was getting help with their account.
Right.
I think I said
you were
that
still
I
the
would,
point of contact. Yeah.
Yeah, to start with. And then eventually I think I just slowly started being like, well, hey, we've got this meeting coming up, or we've got this report. Like, are you okay to send it them? Like, what do you need from me? Are you comfortable with this? I guess I was making sure that the team member was comfortable first, because I figured a happy team, like, they come first. Your team members are happy, your clients are happy, and it just works like that. So that started happening. He became more confident. He realized that this client was like not some dragon that was out to get them, but just a nice guy. And then it worked from there.
Yeah. What was that? Again, long time ago. You might not remember, but 1 to 3 months transition period. What was that time frame?
Probably about 1 to 3 months, yeah. At first, it would have been he was kind of an assistant, and then it would have been gradually take on more clients and gradually speak to more clients. And then after that, it was like, Jodie, who's Jodie? And then that allowed me to do more sales, and that allowed me to hire more people. And I think probably something important to mention as well is I really wanted to be irrelevant at this point, because I think I'd probably figured out, maybe from reading the E-Myth or from reading the 4 Hour Work Week, that it wasn't a good thing to want to be so important that everyone needs you all the time. I think I was kind of past that. And I named the agent, because my name's Jodie Cook and the agency was called JC Social Media. So at the start, I probably hadn't been thinking about that. But by that time, it was like, no, this is really good. The more invisible I am to clients, the more I can be visible, like online and at events and things, the more that we grow, but the more I don't need to do all the work all the time.
Mm-hmm. So then when you had some account managers in place, what were some of the operational or fulfillment service delivery challenges you started encountering?
Mm. So I think getting people up to speed, given that we were doing such a wide range of services, was probably a big challenge. And so what we found in the team was that people would naturally just be good at some platforms and less bothered about other ones. And then eventually that was to do with the sales team because they'd make sure that they were giving the account managers the platforms of the clients that suited their skills. What else? I think that once you as the owner are not involved in the communication, you still want to make sure that it's in your style, on brand. You still want to make sure that it's like someone's carrying through the reputation of the company in the right way. But that was a lot to do with the training. I think if like no one's going to join your team and just know exactly how to run a client meeting how you want them to. They're just not going to know. You have to train them, and that starts by them seeing what you do, because they'll just mirror it and they'll just shadow you and they'll repeat back your phrases, and then you kind of don't need to worry about it because they'll work it out from there. But the manual was a really big part of that because we went down to such granular detail that it didn't leave anything to chance. So it was things like, when you open a conversation with a client, tell them about something exciting. Don't tell them about your really long commute. Don't tell them about how like ill you're feeling, or like that like, tell them something positive. Ask them about them. Be interested in them. And we would put it sounds like such basic stuff to you and me, or it might sound like such basic stuff to a business owner, but if you include it, it's just like, oh, okay, that's what I do. And then someone
Mm-hmm.
follows it, and then they just take it as normal. And then all of a sudden they're running meetings that you feel
Mm-hmm.
really proud to have them as part of your team. So training and then trusting was like a big ethos, just a big kind of mantra that I had
Yeah.
throughout all of that.
So then, going along the journey here, you've replaced yourself in fulfillment, essentially. You
Yeah.
then replace yourself in sales, perhaps because people are having trouble detaching from you. Like, oh, what you sold me on the process, now you're going away. Like, so what came next? What was the next phase?
I think detaching myself from sales was probably a bigger job than detaching myself from
Mm,
account management, weirdly. And what I realized is that I was the main person who did sales for quite a long time, for probably about the first 4 years. And then after that, I had one sales support, and then eventually two, and one was business development manager and one was kind of an ops manager, and they both did a fantastic job, but then they both kind of did the same role as each other, but just at different times. They were both part-time, but both of those people had never been account managers. So no matter how close they got with a prospect or how close they got with a client, that client would never ask them to write a tweet, but they would ask me to write a tweet because they knew that I could do it. So that was the hard thing. It was like, yeah, I know, but that's not my job anymore. And people always want like past versions of you. They want the version of you that's in their head, not the version of you that actually exists. So if someone sees it as, oh, this business owner is selling me this contract and then they're going to deliver it, that's what they believe. And then they're going to be disappointed when that doesn't really happen. So what I figured out was just that it wasn't really going to work unless I wasn't in that process altogether.
yeah.
And so then I became really behind the scenes, and those two ran it amazingly. And then it was a similar situation as with Joanna. It was like, do you need to deploy Jodie? Do you need help with this proposal? Do you need help with something else? And we had this goal within the sales team where it was like if they could take an inquiry, because all our inquiries were inbound, so they would take the inquiries that came through each day, they would speak to them, they would write a proposal, they would like follow them up, do all that kind of stuff, and then sign them up and hand them over. Their goal was to do all of that without me, and that's their measure of success.
Yeah.
That was their kind of KPI. And so because we were always tending towards this write perfect proposals or do things without Jodie, it was like they're both very competitive and very like motivated to do that.
Yeah.
So it worked out pretty well in the end, but that had to be the goal in order to get there.
As you're talking, I'm realizing a mini epiphany about myself that I've been doing recently. I think for much of the past year, I deploy myself sometimes without
Yeah.
even my team asking. I go
Uh-huh.
kind of like a parent that solves their kids' problems for them. I'm kind of in a way doing that sometimes. So now I'm aware of it.
Yes. It's so
Yeah.
normal. It's so normal because you're, I mean, with everyone, not just you, but with everyone, it's going to be ego getting involved because we like feeling needed. We like solving problems. That's probably one of the major things that I kind of missed after I sold. It was like, oh my God, no one needs me anymore. And it's really
Mhm.
strange because at the time you're like, it's nice to have that buzz of your email or your phone and being like, oh, Jodie, we've got this really hard problem. Only you can solve it. It's like, who wouldn't want to hear that? But the thing is, you just keep yourself playing so small if you do that. So then you just have to, as hard as it is, you have to find the bigger problems to solve and stop delving in and trying to solve the
Yeah.
smaller ones.
Well, this is wonderful. Your voice is a pleasure to listen to. You've got a very nice voice. I appreciate you coming on and sharing today. I want to talk about Coach Vox here because
Mm.
I'm pretty intrigued by that. And that's coming out September 1st. We'll talk about that. But is there any bow that you would put on your agency journey? And of course, people, I would recommend, here's my thing, Jodie. Like, I don't try and repeat. I hear someone on another interview, and I did this early on, 5 years ago. I'd hear someone on another podcast, and then I try to replicate like the same podcast. I don't do
Mm-hmm.
that anymore. You can go listen to Jodie on Built to Sell, hear how she achieved selling a business without an earnout and stuff like that. I highly recommend that interview on Built to Sell Radio with John Warrillow and Jodie Cook. But is there any bow that you'd put on your agency journey here?
Yes, for sure. I think I would say if there are any agency owners listening, not sure the direction that they want to take their agency in, I would say decide what game you're playing because you can play any game with agency. It's kind of a magical business. You can use it as a lifestyle design business that you can go and travel the world while someone else runs it. You can use it as a performance business that you could grow to be really big. You could acquire other agencies. You could play that game. Or you could use it as this is my art. Like, I really love what I
Yeah.
do. I'm going to be the artist and I'm just going to build a team around me that helps me be an artist. Or you could play I'm going to build it and sell it game. It's like anything. You can do anything you want, but it's just decide the game that you want to play first, because I
Yeah.
don't think that you should straddle the strategies. And it's so easy to do that when other people are running agencies with their idea in mind of what success looks like. But I'd say decide what it is to you first and then work back from there.
Quick question, actually. I meant to ask this earlier. Did you ever have doubts early on about the business model, or maybe I should pivot and do something else? Like, did you ever think about that?
Yeah, all the time. One of my first bosses actually was a owner of a print and promotion company. We would sell promotional like mugs and t-shirts and like merch, like swag basically. And I remember he was always talking about how many easier ways there were of making money. And so when I was running an agency, I had that in my head, like, sure, there are easier ways of making money. Like, there must be, other than, clients and team members and all this
Hmm.
stuff that we have to deal with. But then I just thought, everyone thinks that. Everyone thinks there are easier ways of money. Everyone thinks there are easier ways of making money. It's far better to just shut up and just make money
Yeah,
than like
exactly.
always be having the doubts and letting the doubts take over.
Yeah. Yeah. Even an example yesterday, a shiny object that crossed my path. It was this tweet. This guy, I know this guy who came in, bought car dealerships, turned them around, and sold them. At his peak, he did 4 in a 3-year span, and he had a private jet and all that. And I was like, and the point of the tweet was, do you really need to start a sexy like tech software business? Like, no,
Yeah,
like boring businesses win. And I was just like, maybe I should do a boring business too sometime. Like, but just
no,
shut up and continue
just,
the path that you're on, and
yeah,
and continue. Yeah, it's working. Like, just whatever. The grass is always greener, of course.
yeah, stick to your
Yeah.
game.
So Coach Fox, I want to call it like, I guess your new product. I'll call it a product coming out on September 1st, 2023 here. And what excites me about it basically what it is you're replacing yourself with artificial intelligence. And I think about it in the business sense, having like a knowledge base or a customer service agent, like literally embedded in Slack, a user in Slack that you can just ping and be like, hey, like, what's the answer to this question? It understands your entire knowledge base and all the call, synthesizes every call you've ever had. I don't know how far your product goes. I haven't talked to you about it
Yeah.
before, but that's what I think about.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, so Coach Fox
Oh, great.
AI is that we're making. artificially intelligent coaches and mentors based on real people. And it's actually quite funny. I've just realized how connected it is to this whole story, because we've just been talking about how much I tried to take myself out of the picture by writing manuals. And now it's like helping other people take themselves out of the picture by cloning themselves with AI. So it's very in line with just the whole freedom thing. Like, if don't answer questions twice, train an AI to answer the questions for you, and then be free forever to do whatever you want to do. Sit on the beach, doesn't matter. Start a bigger business. But yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. So we've got 80 founding creators on board who we have cloned, who have AI versions of them out there talking to their clients, acting as lead generation tools on their website. Some of them are charging for access to the AI version. Like, I mean, talk about scaling yourself to infinity. It's like there is no work involved other than the training, and they're charging $10 a month for access to an AI coach version of them. And then, yeah, September the 1st, 2023, we opened 250 more spaces for creators who want to do it as well.
Wonderful. And that's coachvox.ai, VOX, of course. Yeah, I'm excited about that. See that, try that. I think that, for reference for people, I think that ranges from $99 to $1,000 per month or something like that. I have no idea. But it's pretty reasonable.
For creators, it's $99 a month. And it's specifically for people who've already done the hard work, because they've already got content. So they've already written the book, written the articles, recorded the podcast episodes. It's like, this is where all that hard work they put in the past now works for them, because it can be literally like delivering on their behalf, looking after clients on their behalf while they're not working.
Cool. Again, thank you for being here today. CoachVox.ai, Jodie Cook. You can find her on Twitter, probably LinkedIn too. I think particularly she's a good Twitter follow. I've been following her for the past month, and I've enjoyed that. So
thank you.
Anyhow, thank you again. I appreciate you being here. And my last question for you would be, if you could share one or two or even three, whatever you got in you, golden rules for business and or life, literally anything, what would those golden rules be?
Oh, so I would say the first one is something that I've been very much practicing in the last year, especially, and that's just simplify everything. Last year, I heard of this bias that humans often fall for, and it's called addition bias. And it's where, whenever we're faced with any kind of problem or challenge, just our natural tendency is to add stuff. So we're like, oh, I'm not very happy, so I'm going to go shopping. Or we're like, oh, I've got this like problem with a relationship or a friend or something, so we're going to go for food, or we're going to go add things. And it's always like add, like tasks, responsibilities, everything else, when the solution is nearly always to cut stuff out. And so in line with simplifying, a big exercise that I do just a lot, whenever I'm feeling a bit like, oh, something's not right here, take a blank piece of paper, draw a line down the middle horizontally and a line down the middle vertically, and write start, stop, more and less, and just focus on stop and less, and do this big audit of your entire life and figure out what is in there that shouldn't be in there, and free up the space for what actually matters. So simplify is a big lesson, golden rule for life, that I definitely want to share.
Jodie Cook, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.